let's go on to another question. It's from Serena Kay, please. Serena Kay.
Is it time to stop fighting the war on drugs and instead regulate, control and tax it?
This is in the context, of course, of the Justice Secretary saying this week that we were losing the war on drugs. We've been engaged in a war against drugs for over 30 years. We're plainly losing it. So the question is, should we instead control, regulate and tax drugs? Ed Davey.
Well, I think Kenneth Clarke really has probably opened a debate, and I think that's very brave of him to do that, as Secretary of State for Ministry of Justice. I think it's important that we do have the debate. I've never been convinced by some of the arguments that say we could completely free up drugs, because I think there are real medical problems that the result for people, and people can be really vulnerable and can be abused by the people who are in drug communities. So I personally think the real emphasis in drugs policy should be on rehabilitation, really helping people and their families when they suffer from a drug addiction. And the government's begun to do more on that, but I think we should continue that work.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a lack of education again, isn't it? I mean, people make bad mistakes because they don't have the information. But for me personally, I don't want my drugs taxed.
They already are. Because you're a smoker, aren't you?
You know nothing, sir.
No, but I happen to know from observation that you smoke cigarettes.
Marlboros on duty free.
Oh, right, OK. Dominic Lawson.
Well, I mean, if I was trying to say how would I help win the war on drugs, one thing would be to show people who take Class A drugs here what they're doing in parts of the world, in South America, the slaughter, the mayhem, I mean, the mass mutilation of people. I mean, it is really disgusting.
Yeah.
It is really disgusting. Yeah. And it can only be stopped, actually, by people here stopping. And they need to realise the consequences of what they do, which are foul beyond anything we can possibly imagine. But also there's a practical thing. I mean, it's not something that this country can do unilaterally. There are treaties on narcotics. If we were unilaterally to say secede from that, I'm not sure legally we could.
How do the Dutch do it with cannabis?
Well, they've pulled back on it. Because
they've only pulled back partially.
No, because what happens...
If
you were, David, if you were to legalise it, you would find all the public parks here and in London full of... I mean, people would come here because it would be legal. And it would be... You would not want your children to walk in those parks. It would be terrible. So,
that's absolutely true. I've seen this.
It can't be done. In other words,
Trafalgar Square will be full of hypodermic needles.
So it cannot be done unilaterally. It can only be done internationally. And I have to say, I think it's highly unlikely that the Americans, for a start, just for starters, would agree to a decriminalisation.
You, sir.
It just seems to me a bit ironic that by reducing our armed forces at this time, we're going to actually impact on our ability to stop production of drugs in countries like Afghanistan, because something's got to give. By reducing our police forces in the current climate, we're going to stop the detection of drugs, which is crucial. And by reducing our frontline rehabilitation services and social services, we're going to stop the rehabilitation of drug users. So can somebody just take a bigger look at the picture? Because it just doesn't make sense.
Alan Johnson, you were Home Secretary.
I think that's a very important... I think that's a very important point.
Can I just before you go... You were Home Secretary. You famously sacked the Professor of Nutt for saying that some of these drugs weren't as dangerous and should be decriminalised. But I wanted to ask you whether, because that's an older story, but do you agree with Ken Clarke that we are plainly losing the war on drugs?
No, I don't. But the point is, here was the Lord Chancellor, a member of the Cabinet, saying we've lost the war on drugs. Generally, you'd move on to the second part of the question. I mean, normally when people say we've lost the war on drugs, they then say they should be legalised and regulated. Ken Clarke said he was against that. Ken Clarke, a member of the Cabinet, didn't say, and here's a raft, we're losing the war on drugs, and here's a raft of proposals from government to start winning the war on drugs. He said nothing. Big question mark. So I'm confused. And I think the point that the man in the blue shirt made was really important because, the last time I checked, in 2010, we weren't losing the war on drugs. It was kind of a one-all draw, if you like, but the number of users, adult users, was at its lowest level since records began. Young people down 25%. That's not the work of politicians. It's the work of loads of people out there working with young people in particular, and teachers in schools, and giving a very clear message. I'm afraid Ken Clarke gave a very confused message, and maybe Ed can tell us whether it is cabinet policy or whether it's just Ken kind of, you know, going off on one.
He did say,
suspect.
Well, he did say we keep trying every method we can to get on top of what's one of the worst social problems for the country. Well, he didn't say nothing. He said we're trying to...
Unemployment
seeing
was the worst
as the
social
Lord
problem.
Chancellor isn't responsible for drug policy, it's the Home Secretary. I'd like to hear what the Home Secretary's got to say about this. Does she think we're losing the war on drugs?
I think King Clarke doesn't... He's a very straight-talking politician. He's been around a long time. He doesn't like to posture. I think what he was doing was just telling the truth. He was talking about the failure of successive governments, or indeed any government, to be able to block drug use. And actually, well, we can all be politicians and say X is down 25% or whatever. It doesn't matter. The plain fact of the matter is drugs are incredibly addictive. They destroy lives. We will never actually, let's just say we will never actually totally win a war on drugs where we eliminate drugs from our streets. And Ken Clarke was just being honest when he recognised, as he did in the speech which he was giving, the successive failures. We have to be honest about that. But given that the scourge is there, the answer then is, what do you do about it? What do you do about rehabilitation? Now, I am somebody who has used drugs in the past. I have used Class A drugs in the past. I said this when somebody attempted to blackmail me over the issue during the Murdoch hearings. I thought it was better just to come clean with the public and say, yes, I have done this. And it is something that I regret incredibly in my youth, that I messed with my brain. I said we all do stupid things when we're young. It's had long-term mental health effects on me. It's caused me to be more anxious than I need to be. It's nothing that anybody needs to glorify. And not speaking as somebody from an ivory tower, but speaking as somebody who's had experience with it, I think legalisation, making it more easily available to people, is exactly the wrong way to go.
Okay. Just to clarify, what Class A drugs?
I'm not going to... I've never said... I've said they were Class A. I've never said what Class A drugs I did. And I don't want to say so, because I don't want to glorify those drugs and give those drugs a great name. Yeah, I did serious drugs, and it messed with my head, and it's a terrible thing, and I don't want to see other young people exposed to that by legalisation. That is the wrong route.
The woman up there. The woman with the blue... Yes, the blue...
Does the inclusion of athletes who have been convicted of drug abuse for the pursuit of an extra Olympic medal, or the possible extra Olympic medal, sending out the wrong messages to young people who might be wanting to dabble in drugs?
Louise?
I think that's one for the Olympic sporting authorities. I don't like the idea that people that have used steroids or other performance enhancing just basically seems to me to be cheating. So I think on the cheating grounds there shouldn't be medals for them.
John Lydon, can I come back to you? You said you didn't want your drugs taxed.
Yeah, I was obviously being, like, you know, cynical and witty and ironic at the same time.
Right. So what's your serious view?
What my point is, as always, I want everything in life to be transparent, and that includes all information. Young people are denied information. They're denied everything in any way to fully understand what it is that's being offered to them. This is why you get unwanted pregnancies and stupid drug casualties. The things are out there. Why can't the correct information be easily accessed?
What do you mean by the correct information?
The effects of every single narcotic. And most of them are manufactured by chemical companies anyway, so you can begin right there. America is really, quite frankly, the biggest drug creator there is.
And
like ecstasy and things like this.
Legalising drugs.
Ecstasy is a drug America created to deal with psychotic patients. Isn't that lovely? All right?
Legalisation of drugs.
Legalisation, I don't see why these things should be illegal if the correct information is out there. Now, here's the problem. You can kill yourself with 2 tablespoons of table salt. Are you now going to ban table salt?
Come on.
Okay. Come on, nothing. Just because you've had a bad time of it,
I'm
which
not,
I don't believe. You're here. You're very coherent, Class A.
I'm not the only one, John. I'm not the only one. You may have come out of it unscathed.
Either.
You may have come out of it.
Let us, as human beings, determine our own journey in life. No institution or government will tell me other. I have friends, family, culture to
All right,
help.
the lady here saying you're wrong. You've spoken before, but speak. Yes, you may.
Oh, sorry.
You're shouting
Sorry.
you're wrong
Yeah,
at him.
John,
I thought you
you're
might want
wrong,
to add
okay?
to it.
Hello.
I hear what you're saying, Louise, sorry. Louise, yeah? I don't know what the experiences of the people who are in this audience today, okay? But I've worked with young people, okay?
So
who
have
have... Can I finish, please?
Yes,
I've
ma'am.
worked with young people, okay, who've abused not just A-class drugs, okay, you've referred to, we know what can happen there, but drugs that are classed as B and C-class drugs. And I've seen the effects. I've gone in the hospitals and I've seen the long-term effects that it's had on those young people and their lives and how their lives have changed. There is no way that anybody in here can really sit here and say to me right now, okay, that those drugs should be legalised, okay? Yeah. It is wrong.
I disagree.
It is dangerous.
I want you to understand, I'm not talking as a middle-class twat from Tring here. I come from Finsbury Park. I'm a working-class solid boy, me, right? We know, and we help each other out, and we stop that kind of, like, situation, right? And there's bad parenting there. There's many, many things that aren't helping. And it's always down to disinformation. And it creates this subculture that drugs are somehow cool and trendy. Eliminate that from the agenda.
All right.
All right?
The man in the check shirt there in the middle, the young man there. Yes.
Can we not listen to the scientists instead of firing them for voicing what they found?
Alan Johnson fired a scientist.
Yeah,
he
Professor Nutt, about the marijuana case, when no one's actually died of marijuana use and more people die of peanuts.
Look, let's not rake over old coals, but
the
advisory council on the misuse of drugs consists of more than just Professor Nutt, and they are absolutely adamant about legalisation of drugs. Professor Nutt was a government spokesman. He's entitled to put his views forward as a member of the public, but when you are the chair of that board and you're responsible to government, then you don't go off making statements like horse riding is more dangerous than ecstasy. I mean, there's lots of kids that I know in my constituency that are having terrible problems with ecstasy. There's not many who horse ride on the Gypsyville estate in Hull, incidentally. So, you know, saying those things as an individual, he's perfectly entitled to do. Saying it as a government spokesman, he's not. He had to be sacked. He was.
OK. The woman there on the right.
We talk about strictly legalising and drugs being illegal and legal. Could we not try something like Portugal, where drugs were decriminalised, so they were illegal but outside of the criminal law? So instead of people being punished and arrested for taking drugs, they were genuinely receiving the help
and
that
a brief
they
point
needed,
from you, sir, up there.
that they needed to get.
It's all very well talking about self-determination, but it's the NHS and the taxpayer that has to pick up the pieces.
Okay.